All right, everybody. Well, it is straight up 1 o'clock and it is Friday. So we're going to get started. I know you're all anxious probably to start your weekend. So welcome back to Fast Track. Remember, we're off schedule just a little bit because we're going to do session 4 today, and Monday will be session 3. So the next two sessions are about buyers. They're just going to be a little bit backwards, but I don't think that there's anything in the two sessions that will be confusing from us switching them. Don't forget, next week, you only have class on Monday. That's it. So Monday, you will have session 3 with Bill Scott. And then Wednesday and Friday, we are off. So you guys can enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday with friends and family. So don't get on next Wednesday or Friday and then shoot me a text and want to know where we're at. We won't be on. Okay. So Monday is all you have next week for session 3. Hold on 1 second. Let me get a couple people in here real quick. Okay, for those of you that just hopped in, remember we only have class on Monday next week, so we're off Wednesday and Friday for the holiday. So session 3 will be on Friday. I'm sorry, on Monday with Bill Scott. We're doing session 4 today, and then you're off Wednesday and Friday for next for all. I almost said Halloween. Good grief, it's Thanksgiving, not Halloween. Even though it does, it feels like it should still be October, right? All right, let's hop in. We're going to be talking today about closing buyers and then making the sale and kind of the showing process when you are working with buyers. So we will hop right into that. We're not going to go over your homework from session 3 because you haven't had session 3 yet. Session 2, though, you had with Lauren. You talked about setting up your profile with my Weichert.com. You talked about your playbook. You talked about creating your Facebook business page, sending your initial letter out to your sphere. Now, I know I've had a few people reach out to me and send me emails with questions, but before we go any farther into this session today, do we have any questions that I've not responded to emails for everybody? Any other questions on here today about anything from session 1 or 2? Nobody? I think we are good. I did have a couple of people that reached out and were having a hard time getting the link to work for the business planning. We found if you clear your cookies in your browser, that seemed to help. So if you're having an issue with that link, then try doing that, and you should be able to get in. But continue to send me emails as you have questions, guys, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help all of you. So make sure you reach out. All right. First things first. The new buyer consultation, the buyer agreement. I know you've all heard about this. For those of you who are brand new in the business, you have an advantage over all of us that have been in the business for a little while, because in most states, we didn't have to have a buyer agreement signed prior to showing houses. Now we all do. So you've got to make sure before you start showing houses that you've got your state buyer agency agreement signed per your state guidelines, okay? I'm sure your brokers or managers have already talked to you about this, but if they have not, make sure you talk to your broker or your manager and find out about those required forms that you have to have signed prior to showing any houses to any buyers, okay? And I want you to get really, really comfortable with this conversation about these forms. If you're not comfortable with what they say, please read them line by line and get with your broker if there's something you don't understand, or if there's something you're like, I don't really know how to explain this. It's not running smoothly for me. Make sure that you understand how to deliver these forms and get them signed. Okay. So this would be top on my priority list right now before I start working with any buyers, is getting good at this form. What I always suggested to agents when I was managing, I would make them go through, excuse me, I would make them go through the listing contract and the purchase agreement, and I would make them read it line by line and present it to me as if I were the buyer or seller. And I would have them highlight the things that they didn't quite understand or they needed help on. So get good at this, because this is how you sell your value. But this is the first thing you've got to know when you're working with buyers, is you've got to get these buyer agency agreements signed. Okay. So on Monday, when you meet with Bill Scott, you're going to hear all about our buyer consultation. There's getting to know you questions that you can do with your buyers. Okay. So after you do the buyer consultation with them, This is when you start showing houses. So that's where we're going to pick up on today. So we've already had our buyer consultation. We've already asked a lot of questions of our buyers. We're getting to know them. And now we're going to actually start showing them houses. Okay. So the showing process really is a continuation of that buyer consultation, because no matter how much you sit with these new buyers and learn about their wants and their needs, it's going to change a little bit when you start showing them houses. They're going to think that they want a certain thing, that something is a must or a requirement in the new house they want to buy, but that can change once you start showing them houses. So this is again is just a continuation. It's just solidifying your relationship with them, because if you actually sit down and have that buyer consultation and you listen and you really nail down their wants and their needs, and then you find houses to show them, they're going to know that you heard them. They're going to know that you listened to them about what is important. Okay. That's selecting the homes is going to be based on what you found out in that meeting. So the response to each house is going to further indicate their real needs. So what do I mean by that? When I first got in the business back in 2000, end of 06, beginning of 07, there was this common thing that everybody said, that buyers were liars. And this always bothered me a little bit. Why did we say buyers were liars? And so I remember one day I went to my broker and I said, why does everybody keep saying buyers are liars? Well, here's why. Because buyers notoriously will come into you and say, hey, I want to buy a ranch over a basement. And they end up buying a 2-story with no basement. that's why that's why people would always say buyers are liars. But personally, I don't think buyers are liars. I think we didn't do our job. We didn't do our job asking the right questions and narrowing down on what they say they want. For instance, what if a buyer says to you in your buyer consultation, oh, I really I have to have a gourmet kitchen. Well, the way I would handle that is I would say, fantastic. Tell me more about that. Why is a gourmet kitchen so important to you? Do you entertain a lot? No. Well, do you cook a lot? No. Okay, well, tell me more about why a gourmet kitchen is so important to you. Well, because our friends all have these huge gourmet kitchens, so I have to have that. Well, you mentioned to me that you have a new job and you're going to be working from home and the office is important. So, is the office more important to you, or is a gourmet kitchen more important to you? See what I'm doing? You're getting them to talk to you. And they probably, with that in that situation, would be like, yeah, I have to work from home. So that home office is more important to me than a gourmet kitchen. But you've got to ask the questions when they say these things. Chris, that's okay. If you lose this, of course, you know you're going to get the recording at the end. So I'll keep letting you in if I see you. I don't. Zoom had some updates, so maybe you're having issues that for that reason. I'm not sure, but you'll get the recording. But your job is to, when they say these things to you, your job is to ask more questions and find out, narrow down on what their needs really are. Okay. So if you're asking the right questions to them, you're going to find that out. And then you start showing them houses. Here's what getting good at the buyer consultation will do. If you know what they want, you're going to show them a whole lot less houses. If you don't narrow down what they want, you're going to go out and show them 50 houses before they find that perfect house, because you don't even really know what they're looking for, and neither do they. And they're going to find out while they're showing. You don't want that. Gas is expensive. Your time is precious. So if you do a really good job at the buyer consultation, you're not going to be out showing them a million houses because you've narrowed down what their wants and needs are. Okay. So treat this process as a further step in the relationship, because they're going to know you, like you, trust you after they've spent so much time with you in the showing process, right? And again, if I'm showing them what they said they wanted to see and their needs were real, I heard them, so I'm listening to them. So I'm stressing a lot on this slide, but I'm just telling you, this, you get good at the buyer consultation, it's going to make the showing process that much better. So how many homes should I be showing? We recommend a maximum of 5 homes per meeting. Any more is too much and they start to blend together. Now, there will come a time where you have out of town clients, and that may require you to show more because they're only in town for a day or 2 days. If that's the case, take a break after 5 showings. Give them a minute to recover. Break for lunch. And here's my best tip on breaking for lunch. Let them go off on lunch by themselves. It does 2 things. Number 1, you don't have to feel pressured to buy lunch. And number 2, it gives them some time to actually talk about what they've seen that in that morning showings. It gives them, they may be able to say, no, none of these houses. We didn't like any of those houses this morning. We just want to take them all off the list. Or they might narrow it down to 1 or 2. So give them time to talk. But something that's really important is showcase the area, not just the home itself, especially if you have out of town buyers. Show them what's around, maybe the parks, or maybe you've got trails or the dog parks, or there's an interstate that's close and they're going to be commuting for their job. When you listen to them about what's important, then you'll know what to showcase for them. But you want to sell the area, not just the home itself. Okay. Now you're going to get a copy of this. This is an Excel spreadsheet that we're going to send to you when I send you the recording. This is something that I would have ready for every person that will be buying. So if that's 1 person or 2 people, or that's 3 people, whoever in the group is going to be buying, give each of them one of these sheets. So you'll notice you have all of the addresses up there at the top of what you're going to be showing them during that session. Then you're going to have the must-have features because you've had your buyer consultation. You know what those are. And then you also know what they said would be nice to have. So you're going to put those in there. And I would go to the Dollar Tree and buy those cheap wooden clipboards and put all of these showing sheets on a clipboard and give them a pen and a clipboard with this Excel spreadsheet. Again, it's hard to remember after you've seen so many homes. It's hard to remember what house had what feature. They will all start to run together. Recommend that they do fill out this sheet as you're leaving every house, maybe like on the way to the next house. Have them rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. Again, this is going to help you narrow down what they want and then what houses we're seriously looking at. What houses do we maybe need a second showing on? Okay, so you're going to have this, but show them this form before you go out and put them in the car. Ask them to fill them out at every time, and then when you guys get back together, you'll regroup and you know kind of what they're looking at. But I promise you they're going to run together. You're going to have that buyer that said, you're going to ask them, well, which house did you like best today? And they're like, oh, was it this house that had this feature and this house that had that? Well, I can't remember. We've seen so many today. So you're just helping them kind of be a little bit more prepared. Okay. So before heading out, it's great to drive together. And why is that? It's great to drive together because you can point out those features around town. You can show them things. Some people will not want to do this. You've got to know your buyers and their comfort level. Some people, since COVID, don't want to do this. If you drive separate, you could actually call them on the cell phone. They could put you on speaker and you could give them the kind of the guided tour that way. When I first started in real estate, it was common. Every buyer rode in my car. Unless I had people that had too many people in their car, they always rode with me. But that's kind of changed a little bit since COVID. So just find out from your buyer what their comfort level is. And then that's kind of what you go with. And again, it might be different for everyone. Be sure your car is stocked with a just in case item. What do I mean by that? What do you think if I was going to have a package in my car for just in case? What items do you think I would have in that? You can unmute yourselves and speak up. What do you think would be in there?
I'm sorry, tissues.
I'm sorry.
Water.
Tissues, water. And guys, we have label. You can make your own personalized water bottle labels and put on the water bottles before you take off with your showings. They're in my marketing studio. You can actually have labels that have your picture and name on it. How great would that be to have the water bottles in your car be personalized for yourself, right? That's a great tip. What else?
Like wet ones for their hands if they get something sticky.
Yep. Anybody else?
A mirror.
Go ahead.
A tape measure.
Yeah, right on. A tape measure. Yeah. Tiffany, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say a mirror. I guess every car is really equipped with that. But if someone needed to do something, just Basics.
So let me tell you what I carried in my trunk the whole time I was selling real estate. I went to Walmart and bought this plastic bin that I kept in my trunk. I had Kleenex. I had toilet paper. I don't know if there's any rural areas where you live, but there might be a time where you're stuck out and you might have to use a tree and you might have maybe the house is vacant. Okay. So toilet paper, a flashlight, water's great. Wet wipes is true. I had those. I had a tape measure. I had a mallet because the ground can be hard when you're out putting in signs, unless your office has people that do that for you. I wasn't that blessed. I put my own signs in, but I always kept a mallet if I needed to hammer stuff in. I kept a pair of boots and a pair of flip-flops in my car at all times, because if you're walking land, you're not going to do that in 3-inch heels. So be prepared for all situations. I bought a cheap pair of flip-flops at Old Navy that just stayed in my trunk. My boots stayed in there too. A tape measure, I said that. I also did a first aid kit, because what if somebody gets cut and needs a Band-Aid? Bug spray is a great idea, Stephanie. Fantastic idea. But you get the point. The other things, booties. You could do booties because some houses require those. Gloves if you think you would need them. Masks. A lot of people aren't wearing those now, but there for a while you would carry masks.
I was
But
going to say, sorry, I was going to say a change of clothes, because where I live, it's always raining.
Okay.
So you always get muddy. And one of the realtors in my office told me of a story when someone dropped the key underneath the deck and he had to climb under in the rain to get it. And so a change of clothes is always good.
If you live far out, that's probably a great idea. An umbrella. Always make sure you have an umbrella. So you guys get the point, but trust me when I tell you, I would go out and get your little just in case box put together immediately. You'll thank me when you need it. You will absolutely thank me. The other thing is jumper cables. That might be something great to have in your trunk. You're just trying to be prepared. Now, can you be prepared for every situation? No, but you can help things, right? So this is something that I would get to work on sooner rather than later, is to always be prepared with items in your trunk, okay? So you want to create a mindset with your buyers. You want to make them feel as comfortable as possible and free to speak their minds and be honest with you, but not in the house and not on the front porch. You know why I say that? Everybody has recording devices now. Everybody has recording devices. Everybody has a Ring doorbell, and a lot of people have cameras in their house. So you need to educate your buyers on the fact that there are things they shouldn't say within the house while you're walking around looking at the house. You don't want them to say, I would pay less for this house. And then the sellers hear that. The other thing is the sellers could get offended. Maybe the house is not decorated like you or your buyers would decorate it, and they want to speak their mind about that, and then the sellers get offended because they've heard it. Best case scenarios, you tell them you wait till we get at least to the sidewalk in front of the house or back in the car, or jot down a note. We can talk about this when we get back to the office. They've got to be careful. So just make sure they know, hey, if there's something you like or you don't like, please let me know these things. If the area doesn't work for you, please let me know these things, but we're not going to discuss them while we're in the house. Okay. So you need to educate them a little bit on that. So when you're entering a house, always knock. I don't care if you have a showing scheduled or not, always knock, because you never want to surprise someone in their own home, and you never know what you're walking into. I had 2 instances of this when I was working as an agent. One time, the seller forgot there was a showing, and she was literally coming out of the bathroom from her shower when we headed down the hallway. She was wrapped in a towel. And when she saw us, she screamed bloody murder, because you come out of the shower and then there's people in your house. That's very scary. And she totally so I had to back the buyers out. I said, we'll go out on the front porch. You let us know when it's good to come in. By then she's horrified and she's embarrassed. So that was one time. That was one showing. The other thing that I walked in, Jared, you too? Oh
Yeah.
gosh, you woke somebody up out of bed.
And I'm not a small man, and it was a little, young lady, and it was a very uncomfortable situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very uncomfortable. The second thing that I did, we walked into a house and one of the bedroom doors was shut. And I opened up the bedroom door because we toured the whole house at that point. We didn't see anybody. I opened up a bedroom door, and the teenage daughter of the seller had snuck her boyfriend in because she knew her parents were going to be out of the house, but I don't think she realized what a showing was. And I walked in on them. Well, she was very shocked to see me, and so I slammed the door and I said to the buyers, we're not going to be seeing this room today, so we're going to have to. If this house is something you want to see, we'll schedule a second showing. My point is these things happen. Sometimes showings get scheduled a day or two in advance, and the sellers can forget. People get busy, life happens. Their kids are trying to pull fast one. There's just all kinds of things that can happen. So always be careful. Now, if you show up and there is another agent there showing the house, just wait a minute. Wait for them to finish. You don't want your buyers in the house with the other set of buyers. Now, there would be times if we stood outside a little bit and the showing was really cutting into our time, I would go in as the agent and try to find the agent in their showing, and I would say, hey, we're here for our showing. Just want to see, if you're almost done, kind of where you're at. You can be nice about it, but give them time in there because you want time. But let me give you another tip. Don't take the key from that broker. Make the broker lock the house back up and put the key in the lockbox, because the lockbox is what traces who's been in and out of that house. Okay. So don't just take the key from that other broker. Make them put it back in the lockbox and then you get it out, because you want that record of who was in there when. Okay. The other thing is leave the house like you found it. So if the sellers had all the lights on for you, leave the lights on. If the door from the house to the garage was unlocked, don't lock it back. Because here's the thing, a lot of people don't lock the doors between their garage to the inside. And what if you've locked them out? Okay, so just leave it like you found it. Okay, just a word of caution. But sellers can forget. So I would always knock on the door, and I would even open the door before I let the buyers in, and I would yell into the house who it was and what we were doing there. Okay, so just some good tips to help you get started. Somebody else put a chat in. Oh, Melissa said she had a showing at what she thought was a vacant new construction, but the owner had decided to move in, so they got the tour. Well, that can be awkward sometimes when the seller wants to give the tour. But yeah, that can happen too. Sometimes sellers don't leave, unfortunately. So showing the home, you want to keep everybody together, but let the room talk to them. There's no need for you to walk in and say, this is the kitchen, this is a bathroom. They know this. Let them kind of go ahead of you. And what you're doing is you're listening to what they're saying and you're taking notes. If it's a small room, don't just let them go in. You stay out in the hallway. You don't want the room to appear even smaller than it is. Okay. Open and close the closet and the cupboard door so they can stay in, but stay neutral. Don't talk about the seller's housekeeping and decorating. You don't know if the buyers live the same way. So you don't want to talk about bright paint colors and how atrocious they are, but the buyers love those colors and that's how they decorate as well. Or the cleanliness, because maybe your buyers aren't. So you don't know their taste and you don't know their level of cleanliness. So stay neutral and stay quiet about decorating and housekeeping ideas. Now, what if the buyer says, oh my God, these walls are atrocious and this carpet's awful? You can say, you know what, those are cosmetic things. You can paint the walls the color you want. You can change out the flooring. Those are things that can be easily changed. You can say that, but just stay neutral on your opinion. But the key for what you're doing when you're showing these houses, guys, is to really, really listen. Because even though in that buyer's consultation, they told you we want a ranch with a home office and a basement. When you start seeing that, maybe they change their mind a little bit once they get into a house. And that's okay. And they will after they start seeing things. But you're taking notes of all of these little changes and of what they're saying while they're going through the house. But you want to let them discover things. Okay. Selling requires listening. You need to get really, really good at listening. You need to get good at communicating, but you need to be better at listening. Okay. You need to listen to what they're saying. Now, if they miss a feature in the home, draw their attention to it. Nothing wrong with that. But point out a feature that you think might be a benefit to the buyer. Because again, they get overwhelmed and sometimes they go in houses and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And they're like rushing through it and they're looking at certain things and they're missing a whole lot of it. But if they told you that there was a feature they wanted and they don't seem to notice it within the house, point it out. There's nothing wrong with that. But you want to listen more than you talk. This is time for them to talk. Okay. So just let them discover what they want and what they like about the house. Now, help them visualize. This one blows me away. But some people cannot walk into an empty house and visualize where they would put their furniture. They can also not visualize something with different paint colors or flooring. So sometimes you have to get them to visualize where would they put their couch in this room? Where would their flat screen TV go in this room? How would they situate it? Do you have a place in your home that you'd be able to put the home office, right? So help them visualize those things. Take a minute and kind of ask those questions because it might take them a minute to actually visualize where they would put these things. But it might change their opinion of a house if you're able to get them to do that. So you might have to guide some buyers a little bit more. You're going to have some buyers that can walk into a house that's completely full of junk because the people are hoarders and they're like, oh yeah, we see the potential here. And then you'll have some buyers that walk into that situation and they're completely overwhelmed. So you've got to get good at just reading those signals. And talking about signals, here's some buying signals. Lingering. If they linger in a house, this could be a buying signal. If they're touching and they're feeling, they're talking, they're asking each other's opinion, if they're asking financing questions about it, if they're talking about personal property. And why is personal property important? You've got to know, are the appliances staying? Hopefully the listing agent put that in the comments, but they don't always stay. Sometimes there's light fixtures that the sellers have excluded that they want to take. Let me give you let me give you a true story of something that happened to me. I had the listing. My sellers had this amazing light, this family heirloom in their dining room over their dining table. I was a new agent and I didn't ask them what was staying and what was going. They just assumed that family heirloom was going. It should have been excluded. So we got a contract and that agent did her due diligence and she wrote in there that the light over the dining room table was staying. Well, sellers had a fit. That's not staying. That was grandma's light. So you got to find these things out from, if you're the selling agent or the listing agent, you got to find out from your sellers, what are you taking and what is going to remain. So you got to find these things out. They might start asking you, does the pool table stay? Does the ping pong table stay? Does the deck furniture stay? I mean, they're going to ask these things because they're going to walk in these houses and see things they love. Okay. So if they start inquiring about that, that's a good sign. If they start placing their furniture, good. If they sit down, they're very comfortable, right? So if they seem nervous, some buyers get really, really nervous when they find a house they like. You know why? Because they know they're about to make the biggest decision they've ever made. It's the biggest financial decision they've ever made. The ones I always had get the most nervous were newlyweds out buying their first house. They would get really nervous because this is such a huge decision. But these are all buying signals that you should be kind of paying attention to. Now, there's also going to be some objections. Okay. They might say, well, I can't afford this. Well, hopefully if you did your due diligence in the buyer consultation, you're not showing them houses they can't afford, right? But it also gives you an opportunity to talk about your trusted advisors, like the lenders who you trust. Okay. Again, hopefully you did your job in the buyer consultation and you've had them talk to your lender that you like to use. But these can be some common objections. Here's one, we want to think about it. Well, years ago when I sold real estate, they had time to think about it. The last couple of years, they haven't had a lot of time to think about it because we don't have enough inventory right now. So if they think about it too long, they could lose it. So this is a key opportunity for you to be educating your buyers. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're really low on inventory right now. So if we go see a house and you are really serious about wanting to write an offer on that, you might have to make a little bit quicker decision than in other times because houses are moving quickly and there might be a multiple offer situation. So if it's something that you think you want, you might have to move a little quicker on it. Have that discussion. Will the sellers take less? We don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, until we write an offer on this. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull comps and go in at the best offer that you want to go in on, and then we'll see what the sellers will take. We don't know, right? Unless you represent the seller, you don't know that. And even if you do, you can't tell your buyer that anyway. So you just need to educate them. They have to write the offer before we know. We think we should see more houses before we decide upon this one. That's fantastic, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. But again, with inventory moving quickly, you could risk losing this house. Let me ask you a question. If you waited 2 days on this house and I had to call you tomorrow and tell you that it was under contract, would you be upset? Just ask them. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. What do you think we should offer? Well, my job as your agent is to run comps on this and show you the best offer, the best price that I think this house would be willing to go for, but ultimately it's your house. I'm going to educate you on the numbers, but you ultimately have to decide what you're comfortable offering on this house. Will the seller leave again, I don't know. We have to write it in the offer and we'll see. Okay. So they're not going to waste their time asking questions like this if there's not some level of interest on buying that house. Okay. But again, with the number 5, will the seller leave just be really, really careful with personal property. Okay. That could be sticky. And let me tell you something else. I had a buyer one time that bought a brand new condo, first time homeowner. And in the MLS, the builder and the listing agent had they were offering a refrigerator and a dishwasher. That was it. Well, my buyer was a first time home buyer and he didn't have money for all the appliances. So when we wrote the offer, we put in the offer, the refrigerator and the dishwasher that they had already said they would do. And I put in the stove, the range, and the microwave. They didn't even counter our offer. They accepted it. So we get to closing. My buyer's coming in from out of town. He doesn't have time to do a walkthrough, which he should have done a walkthrough before we closed, but he didn't want to. And of course, I made him sign off that was his choice, that we weren't doing a walkthrough before the closing. He said, it's new construction. What could possibly be wrong? Well, there could be a lot of things. So we go to closing. We leave the closing table. He calls me. He said, Shauna, we have a problem. I just got to the condo and there's no stove and there's no microwave. So I pick up the phone and I call the listing agent who I had worked with and had a relationship with. And I said, hey, Andy, hey, my seller just got to the condo and there's no stove and there's no microwave. And he said, Shauna, the MLS said the builder wasn't providing those things. And I said, yes, but you might want to go back and look at our contract because I wrote it in the contract and you accepted our contract. You never countered it. And he said, oh, had a few choice words and said, well, it looks like I'm buying your client a stove and a microwave. He missed it. He missed it in the contract and didn't even point out to the builders that we had put it in there. So the agent got to buy my client a microwave and a stove. So that's why I tell you to be very, very careful with personal property. All right, so you got an offer. So we've found the house, we have written the purchase agreement, and now we have an accepted offer. So what constitutes a good offer, first of all? Okay. First of all, it's got to be tailored to your buyers. They have to have a recent pre-approval letter, guys, and you need to stay up on this. So if you have buyers that come to you and it's been 30, 45 days, 6 months since they talked to a lender and had a pre-approval letter, you need to get an updated one because things change. Things change in their credit, things change in their employment, things are changing with rates. You've got to have an updated pre-approval letter. If you don't have that, two things. First of all, you don't really know their buying power. So you could be out showing them houses they can't afford. And trust me, when you show a buyer a house they can't afford, and then you got to go show them one they can afford, what do they want? They want the better, bigger house. Yeah. So you want to save yourself some heartache by making sure you're showing them houses in the right price range. Plus, when you can give a pre-approval letter with your offer, the sellers are going to take them a little bit more serious because they know they've already started the process of being pre-approved. Okay. The other thing is the closing date. Call the listing agent and say, hey, my buyers have some flexibility on when we close and when they move in. What would be best for your sellers? That would be a nice phone call to make, because what if the sellers are moving out of state? Or what if they're not closing on the house they're buying for a few extra days? That would be nice to know. And that also would set up the expectation of your buyers of when that you could possibly close. You're already going to ask the lender, how long will it take us to close? But go ahead and ask the listing agent. A good fair price. Again, we've got the price trend analysis, which you guys will be hearing about. You're going to run comps. You're going to have some idea what a good fair offer is. And you're going to talk your buyers through that. And then the earnest money deposit. Ask your manager or your broker what constitutes a good earnest money deposit in your area. Typically like 1 to 3% of the sale price. But ask them. But the earnest money deposit, guys, if your buyers really want this house, that shows the seller how much skin they have in the game and how bad do they want this house. They're willing to put some money down. Now, you need to educate them. If something happens, they could lose that earnest money. Talk to your manager or your broker about that after you've gone through your contracts. But they need to put a good faith effort down on their earnest money deposit. Okay? So these are things that constitute a good offer. There's all kinds of contingencies in the contracts. So inspections and appraisals. I don't know your state contracts, but you need to know what contingencies are in your contracts and make sure that your deadlines are good on those things. You want to give your buyer enough time to get these things done, but you don't want them so long that the seller's like, why do they need so much time to do this? Okay. But again, I'm sure your brokers and your managers are going through contracts with you. This is why I'm telling you, when they do that, get your contract out and read every word of your contract. You need to get good at knowing what it says. Because if you don't, you're not going to write a good offer because you don't fully understand it yourself. Okay. There's going to be lots of paperwork. So you're going to have your purchase agreement. You're going to have your pre-approval letter. You will have agency disclosures. There's other mandatory disclosures like lead-based paint or a seller's disclosure. You need to find out what those mandatory disclosures are in your area. Some areas have septic disclosures, like the houses are on septics instead of city sewer. You need to know what your local disclosures are, those mandatory disclosures. I would always have a copy of the MLS. An estimate of the seller's closing cost. You can do this, or you can work with a lender or a title company to help you do this. And then you want to talk about a home warranty plan. Now, home warranty plans, let me give you a little cheat on how to know what home warranties cover. I want you to remember the word peach, as in the fruit, peach, P-E-A-C-H. So plumbing, electrical, appliances, cooling, heating. Now, some plans don't cover appliance. The plans have different things they do and don't cover. So you need to find out in your office who you guys use for home warranty plans. They all have brochures. They normally have 3 different plans. You need to be familiar with what they cover and what they don't cover at every price point. Now, and this might be a mandatory document in your offices, but I always had them, if I would tell them about a home warranty plan, if they said, no, we don't need it, I always made them sign off on that. Because here's what you don't want to happen. They buy the house. You didn't talk about a home warranty plan. They go into work the next week and their air conditioners broke down and somebody in their office says, well, did you get a home warranty plan? No, my agent didn't tell me about that. So if you do, and you should, make them sign off whether they decide they want one or they don't. That's just a little CYA for you, okay? So review with your managers and your brokers, what are the mandatory documents that I have to turn in when I get something into contract? You need to know that. You need to make sure that when you turn in your files, you turn in a complete file to your managers and your brokers. Stay organized. Don't make your managers or your brokers have to chase you down for signed documents. Don't be that kind of broker. I want all of you to be the brokers, the agents. I don't know if you're all brokers in your states. Maybe some of you are salespersons, but I want you to be the agent in your office that your manager or your broker knows when they see a file from you, it's complete. Everything's in there that I need. Don't make them chase you, because guys, if you're not turning in all your paperwork, chances are you've missed getting something signed, and that's not good. So make sure you find out what makes a complete file for your office, and those are the documents that you're turning in. Okay, you're gonna kill lots of trees. I don't think anybody on here is in California, but if you're in California, they're killing lots of trees out there. Their disclosure package is the biggest I've seen in any state. It's crazy, but you just need to know what constitutes a complete file. So coaching your buyers is really, really important. So you've got to set the stage for negotiations. Okay, it's not always about price. Sometimes to sellers, the price is fine, but the closing date's not right, or the possession date's not good for them, or you're wanting 1 million inspections done. The forms, the sign, where can we find the forms that clients sign off on declining services, like, oh, on the home warranties? Now, when in Indiana, our home warranty brochures had a place that buyers could say waive and they could sign it. I don't know what your states have. So you'll just have to find out from your manager or your broker if you have those. Worst case, you could show them your brochure and have them sign a piece of paper that says they waive it. I mean, just something to CYA. But now our brochures in Indiana had a place you could go through the brochure, and there was a place that said waive. So Yolanda, you'll have to check with your manager or your broker on that. So you want to set the stage for these negotiations. You need to explain to them it's not always going to be about price. It could be about terms. Okay. And you want to review the purchase agreement with them. You're welcome, Yolanda. Make sure you review the purchase agreement with them. Walk them through everything they're signing. You need to be able to explain every paragraph in your contract. What does it say? They need to know what they're signing. Okay. Now, to create some doubt with the buyer, a little bit of doubt, because here's the thing. You don't want them always going out and seeing houses and saying, oh, I'm going to wait on this one. I'm going to wait on this one. I'm going to wait on this one. Have that conversation with them again and just say, hey, inventory's tight. So you gotta know, if you lose this house, are you okay with it? Or are you going to call me mad? But they're not going to know that if you don't have the conversation with them. You also need to explain the seller's options when they get a contract. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we are going to present this contract that we've just put together and you've signed to the seller and to the listing agent. Now, here's 3 things that can happen. The sellers can either accept your offer as is and sign off of it. That's fantastic. We're going to get the ball rolling. We're going to hopefully get to closing. But they also could reject it. They could just flat out say, we reject this offer. They have that. They have that right. Or they could counter the terms in that offer that they don't like. Now, when they counter, if they counter, we'll sit down and go through that, and you'll either be okay with it, you'll either sign off, or we can counter back. So you just need to explain to them some people think, well, if the sellers rejected it, they just get mad. Well, they have that right. Okay. Maybe your buyers presented a lowball offer and sellers are like, this isn't even worth us responding to. But if I've had that conversation with my buyer about making lowball offers, they're not going to be shocked when the sellers reject it, right? So you're just trying to head off all these conversations up front. It's good to be able to have these conversations with your buyers ahead of time. Okay. So Yeah, so you want to just get with your brokers and your managers and know what the forms are. We have another question. If the seller rejects an offer, do they have to say why? No. They have that right. It's their house. Now, the listing agent might say, they might call you and say, look, hey, Tiffany, you wrote this offer. I've got a rejection coming. I'm so sorry. My sellers were so offended at such a low price. If you guys want to rewrite and come back to the table, we'll entertain another offer. But they were just, usually it's price they're offended at. Because if it's something like closing dates and things like that, they'll normally will counter. Okay. But this is a good point for me to tell you this. It's really, really important for you to have relationships with the other brokers in your area. Now, something I did really early on when I became an agent was I jumped in and got very involved in the board of realtors. See what that looks like for you in your area. But what that did for me was I sat on a lot of different committees with agents in my town that I was able to build relationships with. And then when the time came for me to write an offer on one of their listings, or they brought me an offer, I knew them already. So I had built a relationship with them. That helps in communication. Sometimes that helps you if you know the person. It helps you not get totally offended if they come at you a little snarky or you think they're a little snarky. Now, if you don't know that agent, you could get offended right off the bat. But if I know that person and I'm like, that's not them. They're okay. This is something that their clients ask them to do, or they're just having a bad day. I've built a relationship. I'm going to be able to call and have a conversation with them. So I'm going to tell you that your relationships with the other agents in your town and in your community are very, very important. I built relationships with some other agents and brokers back then that I'm still friends with today, almost 18 years later, and I never even had to deal with them. But I built those relationships. So that's really important. So I only tell you all that because it's good to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody that you already know, like, and trust as the agent and have a civil conversation with them. Okay. So that's important. So presenting the offer. So when it's another agent's listing, I would always, always, always pick up the phone and call them and say, I have an offer on the way. That's just common courtesy. And I didn't put it in an email. I would put it in an email if I sent the offer that way, but I always called either way. Because you guys, if you don't already know as an agent, you're going to have 645 emails every day. Emails can get missed. So if I was going to email it, I'd pick up the phone and I would say, hey, Jared, I've got an offer coming over to you on 123 Main Street. It's in your email right now, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that it's on its way. Please let me know that you received it. You can also text it. I know some agents like to text, which then you have it in writing that you let them know. So that's not always a bad thing. Okay. I would always ask them, are there other offers on the table? Why is this important? If your buyers really want this house, you're going to make sure you're going in with your best offer right out of the gate. You explain to the buyer, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, there's multiple offers on this house. So if you want this house, we've got to go in with our best offer from the get-go. Okay? Because you want to be the offer that they choose. So make the phone call. When you're the listing agent, I don't know if your states all even allow this. You need to know how to handle this. In Indiana, it's called limited agency. And as long as the buyer and seller sign off, we can do it. But I don't know what the rule is in your state. Every state is different. But you've got to tread lightly when you're representing both sides. You've got to make sure that everything is signed. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Everything has been presented. You have it in writing. You've got signatures. You've got proof. Make sure your comps have been reviewed and they're current. Now, again, check with your managers and see if you can even do this, because I don't know. Every state is different. But you've got to be extra careful. You have a fiduciary right then to both people, the buyer and the seller. You got to be careful what you say. Right? There's things you can't disclose. Some people don't like, now, personally, I know the money was nice on both sides, but I was never comfortable doing both sides. My brother did them all day long and he loved them. He did a lot of them. I felt like I couldn't totally represent my seller or my buyer, so I would sway away from them. Sometimes I would give one to the other, give the buyer to another agent in my office. You have to know what you're comfortable with, but more importantly, what your state allows. Okay, so find out. Now, negotiating multiple offers. You got to counsel the buyers, like I said. You've got to know the ground rules for both. If you represent the seller, you've got to go over the ground rules and put in an email for written clarification on what is happening with these. Your sales objective is to get the best price without losing any of them. Okay. Now, sometimes when you get multiple offers, let me talk to you from the side of the listing agent. Your sellers may not go with the best priced offer. Maybe the terms of that offer, even though the price is a little lower, is better for them and they decide on that offer. You don't know. Your job is to go in and sit down and present every single offer that comes in and then give them the information and then let the sellers decide what they want to do. For your buyers, you got to counsel them and say, put your best foot forward and we'll see what happens. The sellers could pick another offer. They could counter. But this is important for you to call that other agent and say, would it be beneficial for the sellers for a 45-day close? Would it be beneficial for the sellers if they had a few days after closing to take possession? These are things that would help you write a better offer if you were able to talk to the other agent and find out some things that might be helpful for the buyers. Okay. And again, you're going to ask that buyer, how would you feel if we lost this house? You've got to have the communication. So making presentation in person. Sometimes, now I didn't do this very often. We didn't get in our car and drive the offer to the other office to present it, but you could. So if you do, you want to make sure you have all your paperwork. I would take the comparable properties to kind of show your number and have all the phone numbers for everybody. These are my buyers. This is the loan officer. This is my manager. But again, this is if you get to present it in person. When you're presenting offers to your buyers and sellers, unless they're out of town, I would do my best to do it in person. Because there's no, if you're doing it in person, things are not lost in translation. It's really hard in emails and text messages to hear somebody's tone of voice, and you can't always say what you need to say. So again, unless if they're out of state buyers, do a Zoom with them. Get in front of them so you're presenting everything in person. So your buyers and sellers, I would definitely do my presentation in person any way that you can. Now, when you're with your buyers, you're going to review every aspect of this contract. And with your sellers, you're going to go over every advantage and disadvantage. You're going to go over the purchase price. You're going to go over the earnest money deposit. How much is the down payment? You've got to talk to the lender ahead of time and know how much of a down payment are they doing with the loan program they're doing? What kind of loan are they doing? Because if you don't know that yet, there's not just a one mortgage fits all. There's VA, there's FHA, there's conventional, there's insured conventional. If you don't have a lender that you already trust and like, ask your manager, your broker, who that would be. Sit down with a lender and let them educate you as best they can on the different products that are out there. Because they all have different down payments. They all have different rules for what the seller can and can't do. And if you don't know that, then you're not going to write the best offer. So my advice is to make sure you sit down with the lender if you haven't already and kind of talk through this. Your pre-approval letter, we already talked about the importance of that. Are the buyers asking for anything that isn't included? So if I have the seller and the buyers are asking for the pool table and the something else to stay, you got to talk to your sellers, ask them about that. The closing date, the possession date, does that work for everybody? Financing or cash? Are they paying cash or are they financing? And again, if they're financing, what kind of loan are they doing? And then you've got to be able to explain the contingencies. These are very, very important. You've got to understand what they are and how much time you need to put in the contract for the contingencies. Okay. If it's cash, you got to have proof of funds. The sellers aren't going to take a cash offer if they don't know that the buyer has the funds to be able to buy it. Okay, they're just not. So again, I know your brokers and your managers are going to go over the contracts. What I'm trying to stress to you today is the importance of understanding them and getting educated on them. The second thing I'm going to tell you is find a buddy to role play with and present an offer and present a listing contract as if your friend or your coworker or another agent in your office or your manager or your broker are your buyer or your seller. You don't want a seller or a buyer to be the first people that you practice on. That's the quickest way for somebody to say you don't know what you're doing. Just because you're a new agent doesn't mean you can't come across like you've been doing this for years if you put the time in and practice and know your stuff. Okay? And this is a really good way for you to set yourself apart in your market. Not enough agents know this and take the time to practice. Now, when you're presenting the offer to the other agent, you can humanize the buyer, but you got to be careful for fair housing. There's so many rules with fair housing. We have to be so careful these days. So I would steer clear of even really humanizing your buyers. You want to verbally discuss your offer with the other agent. Walk them through them. Point out the strongest features of the offer. Okay? Let them know, hey, I know your sellers need 45 days. My buyers are okay with that. So we allowed more time for the closing. Walk them through it. Don't overstate the buyer's appreciation for this house. Don't take away your negotiating power. You got to be very, very careful what you say. But maybe it's a situation where this house has an easement because there's a shared driveway. Well, some buyers wouldn't want that, but maybe your buyers are totally fine with that. I would point that out to the other agent. You know, my buyers know about the easement and the shared driveway. They're totally cool with that. They don't have a problem with that. So what's the strong point in your offer that you can point out? I would do that. Okay. Or maybe they have a strong pre-approval, or they can close in 2 weeks. Whatever it is, that's the stuff that you can tell the other agent in person. Okay. Now let's talk about counter offers. So I've written my offer to the seller and they've countered. Number one, you've got to communicate to the buyers immediately upon receiving that counter, because all of these things have time frames. The worst thing you can do is miss a deadline or a time frame in a contract, guys. Every time I would get a contract under contract where it's all signed off on, it's a done deal, I would immediately go through and highlight all the dates, and they would go in my calendar immediately. You do not want to miss a date or a deadline. This is the biggest way for you to get into trouble. There are time frames in these contracts for a reason. So communicate the counteroffer. You've got to assess the buyer's emotional response, because they could be emotional about this. This is an emotional thing and they will get emotional, but you need to isolate some of their major objections. So you're going to let them know what the seller's countering. What does that mean to them? Sometimes you got to reconnect the buyer to the house, and then you've got to talk them through this. What are we going to do next? Are we going to reject it? Do you really want this house and you can accept it? Or do you want to then counter their counter? But you've got to sit down face to face and kind of walk them through this and talk through this. Okay. Counter offers will happen a lot. They'll happen a lot. So you need to get good at that. So now it's exciting. We've presented our offer. They've countered. We've countered. We've gone back and forth. We've negotiated, and we've got a deal. It's the best day of your life. That's your first time to celebrate. Your second time is the closing table. But you'll be super excited the first time you get something in contract, and then you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm in contract now. What did my manager or my broker tell me has to happen next? Right? Because some of you're going to be training on this right now, and you may not have a deal for a few months. And you might be like, oh man, I got to dig my notes out from my meeting with my broker because I don't know what I'm doing. So you're going to get through the excitement, and then your fears are going to step in. Right? So steps to finish. First of all, you got to let the buyer know that you have an accepted offer. And then you've got to make sure all your paperwork is signed and in. You need to arrange for the inspection and the appraisal and make sure those things happen within the timeline of your contract. Again, you don't want to miss that. Communicate with the buyer and the seller's agent. The seller's agent's got to know these are the dates. Now, let me tell you something that I always did when I was an agent. I would sit down when I got something in the contract, and I would do an email to the other agent, and I would say, this is our purchase price. This is when this contingency date is. This is this contingency date. This is this contingency date. This is the lender. This is the title company. I would put it all in writing, and I would ask the other agent, if you see a discrepancy with any of the dates that are in this email, please let me know right away. That just keeps you all on the same page. You're going to provide resources to your buyers. So who are their choices for inspectors? Now, the appraisals, the lender's going to help them with, okay? But the inspections, you might have to help them. What kind of inspections do we need to do and who's going to do them? They're not going to know that. You've got to be the resource. The title company is going to need stuff. You need to let them know. The lender's going to be needing stuff. You need to stress to the buyers when these people say they need stuff, you've got to get it back to them right away. And then hugely important, make sure the earnest money deposit is submitted to whoever's holding it on time. You don't want to miss that deadline either. Okay. So again, calendar all your dates. Find out from your managers or your broker, how are your files handled within your office? Do you have an admin that once something's in contract, you turn all your paperwork into your admin? Do you scan it into the system? You just need to know, what do I need to have, number one, and where does it need to go? Okay. It's not hard. It's just staying on top of it and making sure that you meet your deadlines. Make sure your buyer gets to their lender right away. Make sure that file start is being worked on and the dates are going to meet. Now, attending inspections are different everywhere. When I was a new agent, I always attended the entire inspection and I just kind of stayed in the background and let the buyer walk through. As I got busier and I was a more seasoned agent, I would just show up at the very end so I could hear from the inspector what things was going to be in his report. Find out how it's done in your area because it could be different. The important thing is your buyers are always at the inspection. The inspection is for your buyers. And you want to stay in the background because you want the inspector talking to the buyer about what they're finding in that house. Okay, so this is for the buyers. Again, the home warranty application, we already talked about that. If they're doing a home warranty, who's going to submit the application? You need to find out that from your manager or your broker. Walkthroughs. This is right before closing. Guys, you need to get in the habit of doing walkthroughs with your buyers before you go to the closing table. Some states actually have a form. Some states have a form that you can fill out with your buyer that you did the walkthrough, and you could write in there, everything is in the same condition as it was, we're ready to close, whatever that may be. But what if something major has happened at the house? You want to find that out before you get to the closing table. You don't want any surprises like I did with those two, with the stove and the microwave not being in the house. And that was pretty minor. So talk to your manager, your broker, and find out what your office policy is about doing final walkthroughs. But I think they're huge as far as a CYA. You need to make sure the utilities are transferred into your buyer's name. So who are the utility companies? You gotta educate your buyers sometimes. These are the utility companies that you need to be calling to get this switched into your name as of the day of closing. That needs to be done before you show up to the closing table. So who's the water company? Who's the electric company? Is there gas? Who all do they need to be calling to get utilities transferred? And then attending the closing. If your buyers are there, you need to be at closing. Now, I always went to closing because I walked away with my check. So I wasn't going to miss a closing. Plus, your buyers need you to kind of hold their hands through that. But again, be sure that the final walkthrough is the day of closing because you want to know the condition before you go to the closing table. Find out how that's done in your area. But coming from someone who was a paralegal for 12 years, I probably did things a little bit over the top for CYA, but that's because I didn't want to end up in a lawsuit. And these are legal binding contracts. You got to take this stuff serious. Okay. So attend the closing or they're different in every state. In Indiana, we all come to the table and then the money would be transferred, the wire would come through, and we would get keys at closing before it even recorded. But now California is very different. The buyers and sellers don't sign together, and buyers don't get keys until after it's been recorded. So I don't know what it's like in your state. You got to find out from your brokers what it's like. But you want to make sure that you have all the paperwork that's required for a complete file when you come back to closing. So ask your manager, your broker, what documents do I need to make sure I come back from closing with? Now, my broker, and this is the way I did it as a manager, my agents didn't get their check if they didn't bring me back a complete file, because I wasn't going to chase them down for documents that were imperative for us to have to close the file. So you just need to find out what is involved with a complete file from your manager or your broker. Okay, just find out how things are done in your office. Now you've closed. What did we talk about in session 1? You want to keep the relationship going. You don't want to walk out of that closing with that buyer and they never hear from you again. Otherwise, you will never hear from them again, and you'll never get one referral from them. You could have been the most amazing agent they ever had in their life. But if they don't hear from you again, you're not going to get referrals. Okay? So here are some things you could do. You could do just sold postcards for the neighborhood they just bought a house in. Why not? You were the selling agent. You could call the neighborhood. Send a thank you note and a gift to your buyers, a closing gift. Now, I know I had one agent when I was managing, she did not take her buyers a closing gift to the closing table. What she would do was find out when they were closing, and she would call them and find out when they were moving in. And she would show up the night they were moving in with pizzas and a thank you note. Because if they're moving in, there's not much time for dinner, right? So there's all kinds of things you can do. But the most important thing is to send them a thank you card for believing in you and using you as an agent and referring everybody they know who wants to buy or sell a house. That's the very least that you should be doing. You've got to thank them. Now we have a client follow-up program. I think we actually we show a slide here in just a minute on this. This is it costs you $48 for a 5-year program that automatically sends stuff to your clients, guys. $48 is nothing for 5 years worth of stuff that they're going to get from you. Now, some offices require their agents to do this. They automatically sign them up. Just find out what the policy is for you guys. But here's what it is. It's a client follow-up program. They get cards. They get nice little magazines, little brochures. They brand this to you, and they send it out. So it's a win-win for referrals and repeat business. Remember the statistic that 88% of buyers said they would use their agent again, but like 10 or 12% did. And that's because they did not follow up. So this is a super easy way. I never miss doing this. It's 21 touches over 5 years. This is a no-brainer. This was a no-brainer for me. I always signed my buyers and sellers up for this. And then you're going to touch them at other points during the year. So this is just added touches. You're going to be touching them with my Weichert. You're going to be setting them up with campaigns. You're going to be doing birthday cards and all the things you're going to do to touch up. But this one's going to be done for you, so it's easy. Now I want you to see this. This is the lifetime value of a client. Lest you not realize the importance of relationships, I want you to look at this screen. So if the average home price is $400,000 and the average commission is 3%, so maybe you're on a 70-30 split. So take the 30% out. So your average take home is $8,400. If the average client is 53, and I told you the other day, I couldn't remember if it was where it was, somewhere 7 to 9 years people stay in a home. The probability of them being a repeat client is 25%. That's our national average. But guess what? Yours is going to be higher than that because you're going to keep in touch with your people. But if the lifetime referral per client is 2, that's $43,000 worth of commission. That's a lot of money. So let me ask you, how important do you think it is to stay in touch with these people so you get repeat business and referrals from them? That number speaks for itself, I think. That's pretty high. And that's you got how many clients, right? So you've got to understand the importance of building these relationships and staying in touch with them. Okay. It's very, very important. All right. Look at it. You guys are going to get out early today. You're going to love me. It's Friday afternoon. You're going to get out early. So here is your assignment for this class. It's to review your local paperwork and know what constitutes a completed file. If you're somebody that's not real organized, I would suggest you do a checklist. Do an easy checklist in Excel that has a list of all the required documents. What are they? And I would print them out and I would put them in each file and I would check them off. Have some way to track that you're doing a complete file. You never know when something might come back to haunt you someday and you'll thank God that you had everything signed off on, you got your paperwork. The second thing is to review an offer to purchase contract and understand it fully. And I'm going to take an extra step. I want you guys to present this to your manager or your broker. So do what I told you, print one out, get yourself a highlighter, read through it, highlight the things you don't understand. And then when you go meet with your manager, or your broker, present it to them. And when you get to that point, you say, I didn't really understand what this means. Can you explain what it means, number one, and how do I present it to a buyer? Okay. And then I want you to start showing properties so you can see what properties are vacant in your area. Show them to a colleague in your office to get practice on what you might want to say and how you might want to handle showing a property. Again, you don't want your buyer being the first person that you practice on, right? No, you don't. You want to appear, even if you've been in business for a month, you want them to think, man, they know what they're doing. They must have been an agent for a really long time. And how you do that, how you appear that way, is practice. So skill building should be on your radar through this entire class of all of these things that you can get really good at. You've got to skill build. You've got to role play, if you like that word better, to get better at what you're doing. You're never going to be really good without practice. And I'm sure by now, in fact, somebody emailed me and said they're feeling the pressure of all this because there's so much coming at you as a new agent. But the way you combat that is, listen to me, learn a little, do a little. Learn a skill, then do the skill. Okay? That will cut down on some of the overwhelm. You can't do everything at once, but you can do something every single day to move the needle and get good at your craft. If you want to be considered a professional agent with longevity in this industry, you've got to start out right now being good and being that agent that's organized and practices and knows their stuff. I can't stress that enough. When you do that, even when you do make a mistake, and you will, guys, you will make a mistake, but people will show you grace because you've put the time in. Your manager and your broker will show you some grace when they are in the office all of the time and they're asking questions and they're reviewing the contracts and they're role playing with other agents or with me. They're going to show you some grace when you make mistakes. Okay. But you got to put in the work to actually get to that point. All right, guys, it's 2:13. What questions does anybody have that you are okay sharing with the group? No questions? Everybody's just like, shut up, Shauna. It's Friday. We want to get off here. All right. Well, you guys are comfortable emailing me, and I'm so glad about that. That's what I'm here for. So I want you all to be successful. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about what I do. I want you all to be successful. So if there's a question you have, please email me. I know, Stephanie, it took me a little bit to respond to you. Tim, I saw your email today. I tried to respond as quickly as I could, but I will get back with you. All right. Well, if there's no questions, then you all have a great weekend. Bill will be here on Monday. I won't see you guys again until after Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey or ham or whatever your family cooks, and enjoy your few days with your time and with your friends and family. And then we're going to be back here that following Monday, and we're going to hit it strong. We're going to be talking about sellers. Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.